1907, Alabama. The doctor who tried to cure inbreeding by creating human hybrids, the forgotten case. A story that has been buried in the archives of American medical history for over a century. In the dense backwoods of rural Alabama, where isolation bred more than just community distrust, a Harvard-educated physician named Dr. Malcolm Harrington arrived with ambitions that would horrify modern medical ethics. The year was 1907. President Theodore Roosevelt occupied the White House, and the Wright brothers were just beginning to perfect their flying machines. But in the isolated valleys and hollers of northern Alabama, time moved differently. Generations of families had lived in seclusion, marrying among themselves, creating closed genetic pools that produced increasingly troubling results. Our story begins in Cullman County, where the Blackwood family had established themselves since before the Civil War. The patriarch, Jeremiah Blackwood, ruled over 3 generations of kin who rarely ventured beyond their 200-acre property. Census records from 1900 show 27 Blackwoods living across 4 cabins, all descended from the original Jeremiah and his wife Martha, who had settled the land in 1842. By 1907, the Blackwood family exhibited the unmistakable physical characteristics that local doctors recognized as the result of family unions. Children born with underdeveloped limbs, facial asymmetry, and cognitive impairments were common among the youngest generation. The local physician, Dr. Samuel Wilson, had documented these cases but could offer little in terms of treatment or prevention beyond futile warnings against continued interfamilial relations. Enter Dr. Malcolm Harrington, a 43-year-old physician whose controversial theories on genetic purification had made him an outcast in Boston's medical community. Harrington had studied under pioneers in the emerging field of genetics, but his radical ideas about genetic manipulation pushed beyond what even the most progressive scientists would entertain. Harrington arrived in Alabama claiming to seek rural practice experience, but his journals, discovered decades later, reveal a far more disturbing agenda. He had come to find a closed genetic community where he could test his theories on hybrid vigor, the belief that introducing new genetic material could reverse generations of genetic decline. The Blackwood family became his unwitting subjects. Confused if you're already subscribed to this channel. You need to subscribe now to discover America's darkest medical secrets that have been deliberately erased from our history books. The truth is being revealed exclusively here. Dr. Harrington established a small medical practice in Cullman County in March 1907. According to local newspaper archives, he was initially welcomed as the only physician willing to treat the remote communities that other doctors avoided. What locals didn't know was that Harrington was meticulously documenting the physical characteristics of every family in a 50-mile radius, searching for evidence of what he called genetic deterioration. In his private journals, recently discovered in a university archive, Harrington wrote, "The Blackwood lineage presents the most compelling case of genetic isolation I have encountered. 3 generations of interfamilial unions have produced precisely the decline predicted by Mendel's theories. If my hypothesis about genetic restoration is correct, this family will prove the perfect test case." Harrington gained the Blackwoods' trust by providing free medical care, something the impoverished family had never received. He treated chronic conditions, delivered babies, and became a regular visitor to their compound. Throughout the summer of 1907, he documented the health conditions of all 27 family members. His records describe Jeremiah Blackwood, then 87 years old, as surprisingly vigorous despite advanced age, while noting that his grandchildren and great-grandchildren showed increasing signs of what Harrington called genetic collapse. The youngest generation suffered from various developmental disorders, with several children unable to speak or walk properly. By autumn, Harrington had advanced from observer to active participant in the Blackwoods' lives. He converted an abandoned church into what he called a health clinic, where he began conducting more invasive examinations of family members. Local historical accounts suggest that many procedures were performed without proper understanding or consent. Harrington's journals detail how he began collecting biological samples from each family member, blood, hair, and other specimens that would be considered experimental even by 1907 standards. He was particularly interested in the reproductive health of the family, documenting fertility rates and pregnancy outcomes across generations. What makes this case particularly disturbing is Harrington's next step. Convinced that the Blackwoods' genetic problems could be cured by introducing new genetic material, he began implementing what he called hereditary restoration therapy. This innocuous-sounding treatment was actually the beginning of a profoundly unethical experiment. In December 1907, Harrington wrote, "The application of my theories has begun. I have selected 5 female subjects of childbearing age from the Blackwood line who exhibit the clearest signs of genetic decline. Through my interventions, I believe their offspring will demonstrate dramatic improvement in physical and mental development." What exactly these interventions entailed remained unclear until county medical records were uncovered decades later. Harrington had begun manipulating the reproductive futures of the Blackwood women without their knowledge or consent, implementing a program he believed would introduce superior genetic material into the family line. By spring 1908, the first results of Harrington's experiment had begun to appear. 3 Blackwood women gave birth within weeks of each other, events Harrington meticulously documented with an almost fanatical attention to detail. The infants, according to his notes, showed marked improvement in cranial formation and limb development compared to their siblings born years earlier. What the mothers didn't know was that Harrington had been systematically implementing his genetic restoration program, a euphemism for a form of reproductive manipulation that violated every ethical standard even of that era. Court records from a later investigation reveal that Harrington had secretly arranged for men from outside the community, men he believed possessed superior genetic qualities, to father children with Blackwood women. In some cases, this was done through deliberate deception. In others, through methods that would certainly constitute crimes today. "I have seen the future of medicine," Harrington wrote in April 1908. "The Blackwood line is being restored through scientific intervention. The infants show none of the characteristics that plagued their relatives. My theory of hybrid vigor is proving correct." If you're feeling outraged by Dr. Harrington's actions, type "unethical experiment" in the comments section. Your voice matters in condemning these historical atrocities and ensuring such medical violations never happen again. By summer 1908, Harrington's experiment had expanded. He had built a larger facility on Blackwood property, ostensibly a modern medical clinic, but in reality a laboratory for his increasingly ambitious genetic manipulations. Local newspaper accounts from the time mention the unusual structure, but describe it as a charitable endeavor bringing modern medicine to an underserved community. Behind closed doors, Harrington was implementing the next phase of his experiment. Historical records indicate that he began bringing additional women from other isolated communities to the Blackwood compound, creating what he called a controlled genetic environment. His goal was to create what he termed hybrid humans, children who would benefit from genetic diversity while maintaining what he considered desirable traits from the original Blackwood line. In his journals, Harrington shows no moral qualms about his actions. He viewed himself as a pioneer, writing, "Future generations will understand the necessity of my methods. When the children of my program grow to adulthood without the afflictions that have plagued their relatives, science will have a new path forward." The local community, however, had begun to notice strange occurrences at the Blackwood property. The unusual number of pregnancies, the construction of the large medical facility, and the increasing seclusion of the family raised suspicions. By fall 1908, rumors had reached Cullman County officials. On October 17, 1908, County Sheriff Thomas Reynolds and 2 deputies arrived at the Blackwood compound to investigate reports of unusual activities. What they discovered would shock the conscience of the entire state. Court documents from November 1908 detail the findings. Harrington had converted the former church building into a full medical facility, with equipment sourced from as far away as Chicago and New York. Inside were 15 women, 8 Blackwoods and 7 from other communities, all in various stages of pregnancy. More disturbing were Harrington's records, which explicitly detailed his genetic restoration program. The sheriff immediately arrested Harrington and contacted state authorities. When news reached Montgomery, the governor ordered a full investigation. The Birmingham Age-Herald newspaper ran the headline, "Doctor's House of Horrors Discovered in Cullman County" on October 23, 1908. The article described unspeakable experiments conducted on vulnerable women and called it a scandal that will shock the nation. However, within days, coverage mysteriously diminished and ultimately disappeared from newspapers. Historical researchers have uncovered evidence suggesting powerful interests intervened to suppress the story. Harrington had connections to influential medical societies and wealthy patrons interested in the emerging field of eugenics, the now discredited belief that humanity could be improved through selective breeding. Court records show that Harrington was initially charged with multiple crimes, including various forms of impropriety and practicing medicine in an unethical manner. However, before his case could go to trial, he was committed to the Alabama State Hospital for the Insane in Tuscaloosa. This convenient diagnosis effectively silenced him and prevented public testimony about his experiments. The women and children from the compound were scattered to various institutions and hospitals across the state. Records of their fates are incomplete, but documents from the Alabama Department of Public Welfare indicate that several children born under Harrington's program were placed in specialized medical facilities due to unusual developmental characteristics. Medical records from these institutions describe children with atypical physical development and accelerated cognitive abilities paired with physical abnormalities. These clinical notes align disturbingly well with what Harrington had aimed to create: human beings with what he considered selectively advantageous traits. By 1910, officials had dismantled Harrington's facility and dispersed the Blackwood family across several counties, effectively erasing their community. Land records show their property was purchased by a timber company with connections to one of Harrington's former medical colleagues from Boston. The entire incident might have remained buried forever, if not for the chance discovery of Harrington's journals in 1978, hidden in a collection of medical papers donated to Vanderbilt University. These writings revealed the full horror of his experiments and raised disturbing questions about why his case was so thoroughly suppressed. The legacy of Dr. Malcolm Harrington's experiments extends far beyond the hills of Cullman County. Historical researchers have uncovered evidence suggesting that data from his unethical program may have influenced early genetic research in America. In 1912, while Harrington remained institutionalized, a paper titled Hereditary Restoration in Isolated Populations appeared in a medical journal. Though attributed to Dr. William Foster of Johns Hopkins University, the methodology described bears striking similarities to Harrington's work. Foster later became prominent in the American eugenics movement, which promoted genetic improvement through selective breeding and forced sterilization of those deemed unfit. The children produced through Harrington's program were tracked through medical records until approximately 1930, after which most documentation disappears. The few records that survive describe individuals with unusual combinations of physical and mental characteristics, some showing cognitive abilities far above average paired with distinctive physical features. One account from a physician at a Birmingham medical facility in 1927 notes, "Patient JB, age 19, exhibits remarkable mathematical abilities and perfect recall, but suffers from pronounced skeletal abnormalities consistent with accelerated growth. Patient reports being born in northern Alabama as part of a special medical program." This patient is believed to be one of the last documented survivors of Harrington's experiment. The Blackwood family itself vanished from historical record after 1910. Genealogical researchers have found scattered descendants across the Southeast, many of whom have no knowledge of their connection to this dark chapter in medical history. As for Dr. Harrington, he died at the Alabama State Hospital in 1919, his theories largely forgotten until the discovery of his journals decades later. Hospital records indicate he continued to insist on the validity of his research until his death, writing extensive notes that were confiscated and presumably destroyed by hospital authorities. The case of Malcolm Harrington represents one of the darkest chapters in American medical history, a chapter deliberately erased from textbooks and official records. His work predated the infamous Tuskegee syphilis study and Nazi eugenics programs, yet remains largely unknown to the general public. Why was this case so thoroughly suppressed? Some historians suggest that Harrington's connections to prominent medical institutions and wealthy patrons led to a coordinated effort to protect the reputation of American medicine. Others point to the emerging eugenics movement, which would not have wanted public exposure of its most extreme applications. The rural location, the vulnerability of the victims, and the era's limited communication channels all facilitated the near-complete burial of this story. The Blackwoods, already isolated by geography and social standing, were effectively erased from history. Today, as we reckon with historical medical abuses and ethical violations, the Harrington case serves as a powerful reminder of medicine's potential for harm when divorced from basic human ethics. It raises disturbing questions about what other historical atrocities remain undiscovered or deliberately concealed. If you watched all the way through, it's because you were captivated by this dark chapter in American history. Leave a comment saying, "I watched the whole thing," so I can get to know you and identify who truly appreciates the hidden stories on this channel. Subscribe now to uncover more shocking historical cases that have been deliberately erased from our textbooks. Like and share this video to help expose the uncomfortable truths about our medical past that powerful institutions would prefer we forget. The Harrington case may have been forgotten for decades, But through careful historical research and the courage to face uncomfortable truths, we ensure that the victims of such atrocities are finally acknowledged. Their story, though horrific, must be told so that such violations are never repeated.